So you are lying in bed, right? It's 2 in the morning. The room is pitch black,
Yeah.
but your brain is it's running an absolute marathon.
Oh, yeah. The classic 2 a.m. doom loop. We've all been there.
Right. You are simultaneously replaying this slightly awkward comment you made in a meeting like 3 days ago and projecting some catastrophic, absolute financial ruin that might happen 5 years from now.
And your heart is racing.
The jaw is clenched, totally. But what if you found out that 90% of those midnight ghosts, like the terrifying scenarios keeping you awake, never actually materialize?
90%. It's wild.
It's a huge number. So today, we are pulling from the classic, intensely practical case studies in the book, The Art of Conquering Worry and Embracing Peace, to show you how to, well, take your brain back.
Yeah, and that 90% statistic is just a phenomenal place to start because it really forces us to confront the sheer volume of mental energy we expend on phantoms.
Right. The mission for this deep dive is to transform you from a paralyzed worrier into a peaceful, action-oriented problem solver.
Because when you look at the source material, which is heavily based on Dale Carnegie's foundational concepts, it doesn't just offer fluffy motivation. It's not just, cheer up.
No, not at all.
It diagnoses a very specific cognitive trap for people who love to learn, who are naturally analytical and curious, which is exactly the type of person who tunes into a deep dive like this. Worrying feels incredibly productive.
That is exactly the trap. But we think, if I stop agonizing over this, I'm being irresponsible.
Exactly. We trick our own brains into believing that if we are simulating disaster scenarios, we are somehow actively solving the problem.
But the core idea from the text hits you right between the eyes. It says, worrying won't fix your problems. Taking action will.
Yeah, the book makes it clear that constantly simulating worst-case scenarios doesn't prepare you for them at all. It actively drains the energy you need to handle real life.
So the roadmap the author gives us to break out of this is basically a 3-part formula. It's clear thinking, plus action, plus acceptance.
And it's a profound formula, really, because it targets the actual mechanics of how anxiety operates in the brain.
Right.
But before we can get to the action or the acceptance parts, we have to look at where all that wasted energy is actually going.
Where's the leak, right?
Exactly. The text identifies 2 primary engines of human stress: past regret and future fear.
So our mental energy is constantly leaking backward into things that cannot be changed, or hemorrhaging forward into timelines that just don't exist yet.
Which brings us to one of the most famous concepts from this material, which is day-tight compartments.
Day-tight compartments, I love that term.
Yeah, the golden rule here is to live only for today. The instruction is to drop yesterday entirely and stop bracing for the impact of tomorrow.
And I want to pause on that word bracing, because the text gets deeply into the physiological toll of this time-traveling worry. I mean, it's not just a bad mood.
Oh, not at all. We're talking about severe physical degradation. The source explicitly lists disturbed sleep, cardiovascular strain, and chronically elevated stress levels. Yeah, and if we look at the biology behind what the text is describing, it's a concept known as allostatic load. Your brain, it cannot always tell the difference between a literal tiger standing in front of you and an imagined financial crisis 5 years down the road.
So your body just reacts the same way.
Exactly. When you worry, your body dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream to fight the tiger. If you're doing that at 2 a.m. every night, you are subjecting your cellular structure to massive wear and tear.
Man. And that physical damage has to be combated with deliberate relaxation and proper rest, which, well, that's impossible if your mind is living in the future.
Precisely. You can't rest while fighting a tiger.
Okay, so the biology makes total sense,
Yeah.
but I have to push back a little on this day-tight compartment idea. Living only for today sounds beautiful if I'm on like a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Sure.
But in the real world, if I completely ignore tomorrow, my life falls apart. I mean, I have a mortgage, I have project deadlines 6 months out, I have a family to plan for.
Right, you can't just drop all that.
The book uses the analogy of a submarine. If a submarine gets a leak, they seal off different compartments with heavy steel doors so the whole ship doesn't sink. Am I supposed to just slam the steel door on the future and pretend I don't have a mortgage due next week?
It's a really vital distinction to make, and the text actually addresses this directly. Sealing those submarine doors is not about ignoring the existence of the ocean.
Okay.
The submarine knows the ocean is out there. It seals the doors to prevent the pressure of the entire ocean from crushing the hull all at once. Creating day-tight compartments is really about managing cognitive load. It's the difference between executive planning and amygdala-driven agonizing.
Oh, okay. Unpack that difference for me.
Yeah.
Planning versus agonizing.
So planning utilizes your prefrontal cortex. It's logical, it's structured, and it's finite. You sit down, you look at your mortgage, you create a budget for the next 6 months, and you write it in a spreadsheet. That is an action.
Yeah.
Agonizing is when you are lying in bed, leaping the same vague fear of bankruptcy over and over without generating any new solutions.
Yeah.
The book is fundamentally action-oriented. You absolutely must plan for the future. But once the plan is made, your execution must live entirely in the present day.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't execute a 5-year plan in the future. You execute the immediate next step today.
Exactly. If you let your mind live in the hypothetical future while you are trying to work in the present, your hull cracks under the pressure.
Okay, that clarifies it beautifully. The planning is a contained action. The worrying is just an open valve of pressure.
Yeah.
But let's take this out of the hypothetical. What happens when the pressure isn't just some vague fear of the future? What if the problem is already inside the day-tight compartment?
Right, a real crisis.
Yeah, the text highlights financial worries as the most common, crushing form of anxiety. Let's say you are a small business owner. Your biggest client just pulled out, and you literally might not make payroll on Friday.
That's terrifying.
It is. You can't just compartmentalize a $0 bank balance.
Yeah.
How does the book suggest handling a genuine, staring-you-in-the-face crisis like that?
This is where the source material transitions from broad mindset shifts to highly tactical step-by-step frameworks. For that exact scenario, the text advocates for the worst-case scenario strategy.
Which sounds totally counterintuitive.
At first glance, it feels entirely backwards. Normally, when we are terrified of something like bankruptcy, our instinct is to look away. We try to distract ourselves because looking at it hurts.
Right.
But the framework says, stop running, turn around, and look directly at the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen.
So define the nightmare.
Explicitly. In the case of the business owner, the worst case isn't some vague cloud of doom. The worst case is, I will go bankrupt. I will lose the storefront. I will have to fire my 3 employees, and I will have to get a job working for someone else to pay off the debt.
Wow. Brutal.
It is, but you define the absolute bottom. Then comes the second step, which is arguably the hardest. You actively accept it. You say to yourself, if that happens, I will survive. I will breathe, I will eat, and I will eventually recover.
But why does actively accepting the worst-case scenario work? Because reading that in the text, it almost feels like giving up.
It's the exact opposite of giving up, actually. It is establishing a floor so you can finally stand up.
I like that.
See, vague threats paralyze the human nervous system. When the fear is undefined, your amygdala treats it as an infinite, boundless threat. By defining the worst-case scenario and accepting it, you put a hard boundary on the fear.
You're telling your brain, this is exactly how bad it gets and no worse.
Exactly. And once the panic of the unknown is neutralized, your brain frees up massive amounts of processing power to move to step 3, which is taking immediate action to improve upon the worst-case scenario.
It's sort of like turning on the lights in a dark room. You know when you're a kid lying in the dark, that shadow in the corner looks like an 8-foot monster?
Oh, yeah.
It could be anything, so your brain imagines the absolute most terrifying thing.
Yeah.
But the second you flip the light switch, you realize the monster is just a pile of laundry draped over a chair.
Just laundry?
Right. It's an annoying pile of laundry. You still have to fold it, but it isn't going to eat you.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The ambiguity is the actual threat to your peace. The reality is just laundry.
And the text gives a very specific mechanical way to turn on that light switch, particularly for financial problems. It says, do not just think about it. You must write the situation down on paper.
Yes, physically write it.
Then write down every possible solution, pick the best one, and act on it immediately. But why the emphasis on physical writing? Why can't I just do this mental math in my head?
Because of a concept called cognitive offloading, your working memory, the part of your brain that holds and manipulates information in real time, has a very limited capacity.
Right.
If you try to hold the emotional terror of losing your business, plus the mathematical calculations of your budget, plus 4 different possible solutions all in your head at once, your system just crashes. You freeze.
Too many tabs open.
Exactly. By writing it down, you physically move the problem out of your working memory and onto the paper. You are shifting the task from the emotional centers of your brain to the logical sequencing centers of your prefrontal cortex. You literally shrink the monster by forcing it onto a 5x7 notepad.
You are taking the steering wheel back from the fear. And that transitions perfectly into another major pillar from the text, which is the get busy principle. The author states plainly that an idle mind is the home of worry, while a busy mind is the home of solutions.
And again, this comes back to the biological limits of the human brain. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you are sitting on the couch staring at the wall, your brain is going to fill that void with simulations of danger.
Because it's trying to keep you safe, right?
Yeah, it's an evolutionary survival mechanism. But the text asserts that it is practically impossible for the human brain to be fully engaged in a demanding, productive task and simultaneously be consumed by existential dread.
It just doesn't have the bandwidth.
Precisely. If you are intensely focused on writing a new business proposal, or even doing something physically demanding like building a bookshelf or gardening, your brain has to allocate its resources to motor function, spatial awareness, and immediate problem solving.
There is simply no processing power left over to agonize about next year's taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Action mechanically suppresses anxiety.
Exactly.
Action beats anxiety. It's such a powerful mantra. But let's look at the limits of our own action. We can control our own hands. We can write the list. We can choose the best solution. We can get busy. And we can seal the submarine doors of our own mind.
Right.
But what about the external world? What about the things completely outside our jurisdiction? Because the source material dives deep into this too, specifically looking at the opinions of other people and unavoidable circumstances.
This is where the third part of our initial formula, clear thinking, plus action, plus acceptance, really takes center stage. We've talked about the action, now we need to talk about the acceptance. And a major hurdle for most people is dealing with critics.
Oh man, this part of the text really threw me for a loop. The author acknowledges that people will always judge you. It's just a fact of human nature. But Carnegie offers this wild reframe. He says, criticism is often a compliment in disguise.
It's a bold claim.
Right. The logic being, if people are talking about you or tearing down your work, it means you are actually doing something important enough to be noticed. But honestly, I have to jump in and say, this feels a bit like toxic positivity.
I get that.
Like if I put my heart into a project and 100 people roast it online, I'm not going to sit there and say, wow, thank you for the disguised compliment. My instinct is to get defensive. My instinct is to feel awful.
And your instinct is entirely normal. But the book is trying to short-circuit that exact defensive loop because it is a massive energy drain. It helps to look at the underlying motivation of the text.
Okay.
The goal here isn't to make you universally loved, and it certainly isn't to convince you that trolls are actually your biggest fans. The goal is your own mental peace.
Protecting the hull of the submarine.
Exactly. You cannot control what other people say or think. If you try to correct every critic, or if you internalize every harsh word, you are essentially handing the remote control of your nervous system over to a stranger.
That is a terrible trait.
It really is. The book suggests this reframe, viewing criticism as proof that you are in the arena, doing something that matters because it strips the critic of their power over you. If you resist the reality that people will judge you, you create secondary pain for yourself. You are basically fighting gravity.
Which leads right into the text's broader, almost mathematical rule on dealing with the uncontrollable world. It says, accept what you cannot change. It lays it out as a stark equation. Resistance equals pain, while acceptance equals peace.
Let's ground that in a very mundane, everyday example. Think about being stuck in a massive traffic jam on your way to an important meeting. You are boxed in. You cannot make the cars move.
The worst feeling.
Right. If you sit there hitting the steering wheel, cursing, clenching your jaw, and resisting the reality of the traffic jam,
You are just flooding your own body with cortisol. You are putting wear and tear on your heart, like we talked about earlier with allostatic load. And the worst part is the traffic doesn't care. Your anger doesn't make the cars go any faster.
the resistance generates 100% of the suffering in that moment. The acceptance, the moment you lean back, take a breath, and say, well, I'm going to be late. There's nothing I can do to change the physics of this highway. I might as well listen to an audiobook. That acceptance instantly brings peace.
You surrender to the reality of the moment, and in doing so, you stop the physiological damage to your own body.
Yes.
And once you surrender to that reality, the text suggests doing something very specific with all that mental bandwidth you just freed up. It says, start counting your blessings. Deliberately practice gratitude.
It sounds like a cliche, I know, but the mechanics of why it works are fascinating.
The book states that shifting your focus from what you don't have to what you do have actively reduces worry. I picture it like a flashlight in a dark room.
Okay, tell me more.
You only have one flashlight in your brain, and the beam is incredibly narrow. You can only point it at one thing at a time. If you are pointing the flashlight at your blessings, the fact that you have your health, that your family is safe, that you have a roof over your head, you physically cannot be pointing it at your worries.
That's spot on. In neuroscience, this is related to selective attention. Your brain is a prioritization machine. When you actively practice gratitude, you are forcing your neural pathways to scan your environment for positive data.
Right.
Because, as we established earlier with the get busy principle, your brain has limited working capacity. It simply cannot process deep gratitude and existential panic simultaneously.
Oh.
You aren't changing the external circumstances. The traffic jam is still there. The bank account might still be low, but you've completely changed where your mental flashlight is directed. You take control of the lens.
So bringing all these threads together, we have mapped out a pretty incredible blueprint for taking our brains back from the doom loop today. We started with the harsh but liberating truth that worrying solves absolutely nothing. It is a phantom energy drain that tricks us into feeling productive while actually breaking down our physical health.
Yeah, and then we looked at the necessity of building day-tight compartments, acknowledging the future to make a plan, but keeping your daily execution fiercely protected in the present moment, shielding your mind from the crushing pressure of the entire ocean.
And we tackled how to handle the monsters in the dark. Not by looking away, but by staring right at the worst-case scenario, accepting it as the absolute floor, and then writing down immediate, tangible actions to improve upon it.
We learned that by physically writing our problems down and getting incredibly busy, we utilize cognitive offloading to prove that action mechanically beats anxiety.
And finally, we explored the profound relief that comes from accepting the uncontrollable external world, recognizing that resisting reality, whether it's the criticism of others or, a traffic jam, only creates secondary pain. By embracing acceptance, we free up the bandwidth to point our mental flashlight directly at gratitude.
It's transformative.
It really is. The ultimate goal of every technique in this guide is to anchor you in the present, force you into decisive action, and help you let go of unnecessary fear so you can actually enjoy the life you are working so hard to build.
Absolutely.
And for you, listening to this right now, think about how much you love absorbing new ideas, how much you value being well-informed, and thinking deeply about your industry or your passions. Now imagine how much mental bandwidth you were going to get back when you stop wasting processing power on stress.
Right, you get your attention back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you apply this simple, action-oriented advice, you get your most valuable asset back.
Yeah.
Your attention.
You step out of the passive role of the victim, waiting to see what the future does to you, and you become the active architect of your own peace.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today, building on where we started at the very beginning. The text mentioned that 90% of the things you worry about never actually happen. You expend all that physical and mental energy for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But think about the 10% that actually do happen. Think about the last time a genuine crisis arrived at your door. Did worrying about it for 6 months in advance make you any better prepared to handle it in the moment? Or did it